Hi, this is James Warda, and welcome to another episode of Coincidental Conversations. Today, very pleased to have with us Dan Cockerell, and Dan has a long, illustrious, varied background. And I came up with this on my own right a few minutes before the call. I like to say he's worn many hats, some with ears. Okay? I just came up with that. Dan, you're welcome to use that in your tagline. Welcome, Dan. Thanks
Love
for
it.
joining us.
Yeah, you're not only a journalist, you're a sales and marketing guy. I like that.
There you go. And I believe a comedian, but I don't know if my wife and kids would agree.
Yeah. Dad
Um,
jokes. I get it.
right. So again, varied background, just some of the highlights, and joining Disney with their college program. It's amazing how many people I know related to Disney and just came in through that college program. So that program is obviously successful in finding
Yeah.
people. Some other highlights: management trainee at Disneyland Paris, general manager of the Walt Disney World All-Star Resort and the Wilderness, not necessarily in this order, but VP of Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and Magic Kingdom, which is pretty exciting stuff. Started your own company in May of 2018. Currently travel the world, consulting, speaking, talking about people first leadership. And if there's anything that's probably needed right now more than ever in this world, it's people first leadership. So
Really is.
thanks again for joining us. And I'm going to just jump in here with some questions. And
Great.
and again, it's called Coincidental Conversations because I do believe coincidences are, a pathway, a portal to connection. Lots of coincidences throughout your career, so I think we'll touch on them as we talk.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, just starting from the very beginning, a lot of different varied jobs, a lot of different varied backgrounds, roles. For some people that would not be easy. Most people, including myself, don't like change. So what is it about you? Have you always been that way? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's I like change when it's exciting and fun. I don't like change when it's stressful. And so I think we all go through that.
Mhm.
But thanks for having me today. So yeah, when I growing up, my dad was in the hospitality industry. So I was exposed to that business from an early time. And I think a big part of this, we moved a lot. He worked for Marriott for many years. And every year and a half, we were moving to another city. And so back in those days, in the 70s, we'd get to a new neighborhood, whether we bought a house or renting an apartment, and I'd go door to door and on my own, which that wouldn't happen today, but I'd knock on people's doors and see if they had kids. Cause I just got, we moved so much. I'm like, all right, it's up to me to kind of network here, I guess. So I'd go to people's doors and just say, hey, I think it's my parents who told me to go do that, And so it's a miracle some serial killer didn't get me. But I'd go and find out, and I learned how to sort of be independent. I'm also an only child, so I've always been pretty independent. So I think that plays into it. My dad, once again, he has an expression. He says, life, a big part of life and getting ahead in life and doing things is getting exposure and experience. And he left Oklahoma, a single mom, had never been out of the state, I don't think, and moved to Washington, D.C. and launched his life. So I think probably the environment I was raised in, my parents we were traveling, they take me to see different places and exposed me early on to be curious and to want to know about culture and try different foods and meet people. And it's also part of my personality. So I think that's always been something it was kind of wired into me, that I was just really interesting about the world and experiences. And I would say they cultivated that as I grew up.
And how old were you when you were knocking on doors?
Second, third grade was when I started doing that. Fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. And then, when you're in sixth grade, you go in the neighborhood and see the kids. But yeah, that's what we did.
I'm just picturing being home and the doorbell rings and there's a second or third grader asking me if we have kids, and that's awesome. That's just a great. I love that image. And we'll talk a little
Yeah,
bit more
yeah,
about your dad in a coming question. I know he also worked for Disney, so we'll talk a little bit about
yeah,
him. Kind of going along with what you
sure.
have said about finding things really interesting. You know, being a kind of a studier of Walt Disney myself, and just being really interested in his background. I'm sure you are too. One of the biggest things that about him was he was able to look at the past. He loved the nostalgia in the past, but always thinking about the future, always innovative, always
Mm,
always curious, right? So
yeah, yeah,
you sound pretty curious to me, right? You sound like a
yeah,
curious
yeah.
individual.
Well, I'll tell you, and we talked about this previously, Jim, is the idea of growth mindset, and today I know that term. There's a great book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and she talks about mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset.
Mm.
And I just from an early age, I guess that's the way I was raised. I always people with growth mindsets, they are curious, they're willing to go try new things, and they're not afraid to fail. There's like, okay, I'm going to go try something, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means I didn't get that thing right. And they're willing to go take risks, and they're willing to go out and try different things. And what I found in my life and my career, I've had big failures where I've tried to do things that I couldn't accelerate in, I couldn't master. But I've had so many wins and so many other doors opened when I was willing to go ask about things I didn't understand, or talk to that person next to me on the plane, or go travel somewhere that I'd never been before, and not get stressed out about, am I going to be okay and all that, but just go see things. And it's built on. And, we've talked about luck. Luck is part of growth mindset. If you see opportunities around you all the time, you'll have lots of opportunities. But if you put your blinders on and just look at, what you think is what you want to do, you're not going to see all those things. So I tell young people in their careers, be open-minded and don't judge moments in the moment about what they can provide you. Just know that every time you take an interest in something new and you learn something new, you're adding a piece of the puzzle to your life puzzle, and those just keep adding up. And those are all going to pay off in the future. The future may be tomorrow, the future may be next week, and the future may be 20 years from now. But all those things that come back to bear. And then once again, the value of experience and exposure. And it really helps you understand how exciting the world can be, and it helps you create your own opportunities. People say, I never get an opportunity. Like, well, you got to go out and try some stuff, and you're going to fail. Stuff's not going to work. It happens to me all the time. I call people and say, hey, I'm Dan, and here's what I do. And they say, no, thank you. Please don't call me again. I don't want to buy anything from you. So, that's not a good situation, but it's not, I can't say, well, I don't want that to happen again. I'm just not going to call anyone again. So I think it's that idea. You just have to get yourself out there and take almost an idea of treating things as an adventure. Just a quick story. When I got on a plane in January 1st of 1992, in Florida, and I was flying to France, and I was going to go move there, and we were going to open Disneyland Paris. I'm on the plane thinking to myself, why did I take Spanish in school? Why didn't I take French? And I've been studying French, and I'm going to sound ridiculous. I don't speak the language, and what am I going to do? And I had one of two options. One is go to France, be stressed out, never talk, and just don't expose myself to sound ridiculous, or say, you know what? You have an excuse right now. You've never lived there. Get in there and just start, use whatever words you hear, learn, just keep your mind open. And in a year from now, if you still can't speak French, it's because you didn't, it's your fault. Right now, it's not your fault. You haven't been there. And a year from now, it's going to be your fault if you haven't learned it. And I went over there, and I got rid of all my inhibitions and my ego and everything, and just would show up, and I would just figure out whatever words I could piece together with English and French. And I kept practicing, and it's incredible when you get immersed. And a year later, no one's ever asked me what part of France I'm from. I can guarantee you that, but they understand what I say. And that was the key for me. I was able to have a conversation. So the reason I was able to do that was because I treated it like an adventure and just knew that there was going to be ups and downs, and that was going to be part of the journey.
Wow. So, and obviously for your personality, that seems to be a really good fit. What about people who are, because there's a lot of vulnerability in trying new things, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you talk to people when you're speaking, consulting, et cetera, who just are scared of trying new things. How do you get them over that hump?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things, and this ties into what I learned at Disney over the years, is you can't change people very much. People are kind of set at who they are, their personalities, their risk tolerance, those kind of things are kind of, I call it a thermostat. They're set at a certain level. They may go up and down a little bit, but it's like, I'm afraid to take risks and do public speaking. Well, you're probably not going to do base jumping. That's like you're going to go to another. So when I tell people, I said, look, first of all, you can't change. So you are who you are, and you just got to figure out how to operate the way with the skill set, the passion, the talents and competencies that you have. So when I talk to people who maybe are concerned about taking risks, I say, all right, well, maybe we'll take this a little slower, or maybe we're going to spend time talking about all the variables. What are all the things that could go wrong if you try to do this, and get it in their mindset, put context around it. And some people, you say, hey, jump off that cliff. There's water below. Some people will just run off and do it. Most people will take a peek. And some people will want to talk about it for a couple hours, and some people will never do it. So I think everyone comes at it differently. And that's where you just got to understand how people process information. Are they logical thinkers? Are they emotional thinkers? And get through. But a lot of times it's what's going to be the advantages of this. And people they weigh those differently.
So I know you do speaking and consulting. Do you also do coaching? Because you sure sound like a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I do. I had a gentleman call me a couple of years ago, and he said he was the executive partner in an accounting firm. And he said, hey, Dan, I've been following you on LinkedIn. Do you do executive coaching? I said, well, gosh, I said, I guess I did for years while I worked. But now that I'm a consultant, I don't have like a certification. I don't have a piece of something that's going to show you that I do that, but I think I could be pretty good at it. And he said, well, would you be willing to try? I said, well, I want to make sure I can do it. I said, why don't you come down to Orlando for a weekend and stay with Valerie and I, and let's hang out and go out and just have a drink. And at the end of the weekend, we'll see if it's, I joked with him. I said, we'll see if it's a love connection. And if it is, then I'll do some coaching with you. And if it isn't, then we'll move on. And he said, after that weekend, he said, yeah, let's do this. And we're still working with him. It's 2.5 years later, but yeah, I tell people, I love coaching. I love doing that. And two advantages I have a ton of experience, and I'm not on the hot seat anymore. When I'm working with CEOs of companies, I know what it's like to be on that seat where you're getting your shareholders are asking how you're doing performing. You have all kinds of issues popping up. You're getting emails, and being in, that's being on the field. I get to sit in the stands now and help direct people. And it's a different point of view, and it's much clearer.
Well, I just love how you presented that to him. Like, you didn't just say, you didn't want to just get that sale, right? It was like, hey,
right.
let's first meet. And Valerie is your wife?
Yeah, I throw that around like everyone knows her, but that's my wife. That's my wife of 28 years and my business associate. And so she and I work closely together in this business. Yeah.
Great. And I know you got a great story about how you met, right?
Yeah. Another example of curiosity.
Yeah.
She's from France. And so way back in the day, she left Lyon, where she grew up, when she was 16, and went to London to learn English. Once again, she did what I did 20 years before I did it, or 15 years before. She went to London, didn't speak a word of French or of English, and she learned it over 1.5 years being an au pair girl, taking care of some kids of a singer who lived there. She moved back to France and went back to school, and eventually someone told her about the Walt Disney World International College Program. It's called the Cultural Representation Program. And that's where, if you've ever been to Epcot, part of the park there are 11 different pavilions from countries from around the world. And the employees that work in those pavilions are from those countries. They're here on a visa. And a big part of the authenticity is you get to talk to someone who's from Germany, who's from Japan, who's from France. So she went over and did that for a year and learned about Disney, learned about working and she went back to France. And a couple of years later, Euro Disney, now Disneyland Paris, called her and said, "Hey, we're going through our Rolodex. You're European. You worked in Florida. You're a great candidate to come back and train to open the park in France." And so she, among a few hundred other European cast members, took that job. So she moved to Florida to train. And she got to Florida. And about a month later, I graduated from college and I came down to train to open Euro Disney. And we lived in the same building. And one afternoon, I went down to do my laundry and this girl was doing her laundry. And I introduced myself. We started chatting. And that was the beginning of some dating, moving in together, a 6-week engagement, now a 28-year marriage. So I look back on that and I think to myself, I'm really glad my parents or my mom taught me how to do my own laundry. And B, I'm glad that I actually had the discipline to go do it instead of, having someone else do it or send it out because I may have never met her. So you never know where that next meeting is going to change your life.
That's amazing. And talk about coincidences. My gosh, you're flying there, she's flying here. You're both learning new languages. You both meet. That is really awesome. And the most important part of that story was you said hello. Right?
Yeah.
You took that risk and said, you could have just not said a word.
Right. And luckily back in the day, we didn't have iPhones. So I had nothing to look at while I was hanging out. Back in those days, you either brought a book or you just stood there while your laundry was going. Right. You had no electronic device. So.
Right. What a concept. Yeah. Boy, that's a great story. So just kind of getting into the Disney part of your career. So how were you first introduced to Disney? Did you grow up with Disney? Did it come later in life? How did that happen?
Yeah, I'd been to Disneyland when we lived in Van Nuys for a year or two, and my dad was working in the hotel business. And I think we went to California when I was 3 or 4 years old. So I vaguely remember it. But I went there once, and then I didn't go to Walt Disney World till I was 19 years old and on the college program. I'd never visited Disney. Growing up, I worked every summer in college. One summer I waited tables in Ocean City, Maryland. I worked in an investment bank one summer just to, get a taste of, is that what I want to do? At the end of the summer, I knew that I could take that off the list. That's not something I was interested in. And I found out about the college program. And at the time, I got my degree in political science, but they were pretty open. And I applied to the program and went down. And the big thing for me was Disney seems like a cool place. I'd love to go visit. It's going to look great on my resume. I never planned on having a career at Disney, but I knew that if you can get your Disney on your resume when you're a sophomore in college, that next job, you're going to have a lot to talk about, or at least people are going to think you know something because they have the word Disney on there. So there was a lot of reasons to go down and did that. And once I'd done that, I was kind of hooked. I loved the structure. Some people really like highly structured environments to work in. If you like highly structured environments, places like Disney are great places to work because it is structured. There are checklists. There's a plan every day. When you have 20 million people visiting your theme park every year, you better have a plan every single day of how you're going to handle that. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed structure. I grew up playing sports. Sports has lots of structure also. I always seem to thrive in structure. And also Disney said, we want people who are, interactive. You got to like working with people. I know it sounds kind of like an obvious thing, but people have asked me before, how do you hire so many friendly, warm, hospitable people to work at Disney? It seems like everyone is so nice. I said, all right, here's the secret. Don't tell anybody. I'm going to give you the secret. We find people who are warm and friendly and hospitable, and we hire them. So this is probably the most important part of leadership is get the right people on your team to begin with. A lot of companies think you can hire anybody and train them. You can train them, but you can't change them. And you can't give people a great attitude. And you can't make them want to love service. And that's something I love doing. So that's kind of how I got into it. When I graduated from college, this was 1991. The economy wasn't too great. And I didn't have a plan. I was a political science major. What am I going to do? And I didn't want to go to law school. So, well, I enjoyed that Disney thing. Maybe I'll go back down there and work there and see what happens. And once again, I had to get rid of my ego and everything, because when you have a 4-year degree from Boston University and you go to a new job and they tell you you're going to park cars, you kind of look around and go, really? And my friends are getting, they're making 5 times what I'm making, and they're working in banks and they have all these plans. But once again, I wasn't concerned about that, because I knew I wanted exposure, I wanted experience, and that was the beginning of a 26-year career.
It's really interesting as you talk, because I'm hearing, there was so much duality to like Walt Disney, right? To him and to all of us, right? We all have these sides, but you were saying how you love structure, yet so much of what you talked about in your past and your career there was ambiguity.
Yeah.
Right? You're flying on a plane to France. You don't know the language, so you love structure.
That's true.
However, it's like you can tolerate or thrive in ambiguity too. So
yeah, it's interesting you say that. Maybe it's a little bit of both. It's because there's definitely a lot of ambiguity, and not just working at Disney or doing what I did. In the world today, there's a lot of ambiguity. And I think what I figured out, and this is something I've talked often when I do keynote speeches, I said, when I ran the Magic Kingdom, I didn't control anything, but I influenced everything. Mm-hmm. So, no one, just because you're the vice president of a theme park, that place is running 24 hours a day. There's 20 million guests. There's 12,000 employees. You're not in control. It's not like you can make sure things do or don't happen. You create the environment. You create the expectations, you create the vibe, and you reinforce that. And then you hire the right people and you put them in there, and then you kind of stand back and let the thing go. And you go in there and help, shore up the areas that need shoring up. But I think a lot of people, and this is probably one of the hardest things about leadership, it's not about working too much and being too hands-on. It's about backing, or can you back away from things and let go of things and delegate and trust people to make the right decisions. And if you can get used to that, you can do lots of things. And so I think to your point, I love structure, but I also had a risk tolerance for being able to go into situations where I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I put the best, I made the odds as good as I could and then went forward. And I think that's a big part of what leadership is.
Boy, I want to one day just be able to say that line you just said. When I ran the Magic Kingdom, I just want to be able, I want to say, that's really,
it's something I'm very proud of. It's something that has allowed me to grow and, do what I'm doing now, being able to go and teach kind of the Disney approach and leadership approach to the world, because I was so incredibly lucky to be in a position like that with so many talented people. So yeah, I was very, very fortunate.
Well, so let me get your take on this one, because, I've longtime Disney fan, I've written about Disney, visited, now actually living here in Orlando. And I remember sitting on a bench at the Magic Kingdom with my daughter at the time, and just trying to explain to her, she'd roll her eyes, I'm sure, because she was so young. How do you take Walt's vision that started with, Disneyland, et cetera. How do you keep that vision embedded in an organization and keep people focused on it and living it every day? Mm-hmm. I'm guessing structure has something to do with it, but what's your take on that? How do you do that? That's pretty strong.
Yeah, it is. Perfect question, because there is a way to do that. So Valerie and I teach to companies, and we learn this at Disney. We have something at Disney I think is a big differentiator. There's a couple things, but one is it's called the common purpose. And the common purpose isn't the vision, and it's not the mission of the company. The common purpose is what everyone should be thinking about when they come into work every day. No matter what job they have, no matter what level they are, they think about that every role is different, but the purpose of everyone that works there is the same. And at Disney, well, let's go. What do you think the common purpose of every employee at Disney is?
To provide wonderful experiences for the guests that,
Yeah.
that they've
That's
had.
one way there's many ways to say it. And that's one
Yeah.
great way to say it. Sometimes we tell people, make magic.
Hmm,
Your purpose is to make magic.
that's great.
And then, and while you're doing that, you're going to be selling Mickey bars. And while you're doing that, you're going to be checking the heights of guests coming onto the attraction. And
Hmm,
while you're doing that, you're going to be check people in the hotel. And while you're doing that, you're going to be a housekeeper cleaning the rooms. And so you talk about this, and it's people joke, they're like, man, what do you put in the water there when you drink the Kool-Aid? I'm like, yeah, you drink the Kool-Aid because that is what you do every day. That's what every day you're coming in saying, how do I create magic for guests? Because we know that we got the big stuff right. We know we have the castle and the attractions. We're going to keep building those. But it comes down to, is the guest going to walk out of here with a emotional connection? Are they going to have a story about how they were treated or an experience they had? We don't get letters from people. We seldomly got letters saying, wow, we went to Disney and we really love Space Mountain. Thanks. People don't talk about that because they know Space Mountain's there. They may tell their friends they did it, but it doesn't add extra value. They know they're going to get to do that when they come to Disney. The letters we get is, we got back to our room and at the hotel, and there were beautiful animals. The towels were folded like animals all over the room, or all of my daughter's plush were propped up on the bed, and Mickey had the remote control in his hand. They were watching the Disney Channel. Or I was in the Magic Kingdom, and one of the custodial cast members had a pan and a broom, and they had water, and they painted a picture of Mickey Mouse or Goofy in water on the ground. And we took a picture of that with our son. Or we were walking in the park, and someone walked by and saw it was my son's birthday. And he took us and said, do you have 5 minutes? And they took us to an area, and we got to meet Jack Sparrow, in person. So it's this idea that everyone, no matter what job they're doing, they're always looking for opportunities to do things that only are done at Disney. It's an only Disney moment. Only at Disney would a housekeeper who never sees a guest create these scenes in the room to create for the guest to discover when they get back. Only at Disney would the bus driver be doing a sing-along on the way to one of the hotels or one of the resorts or the parks. So once you rally people around a common purpose and you hire the right people, you're basically empowering them to be creative and go figure stuff out. So if I told you this whole common purpose story, and then I said, look, I'm not going to give you any training, but I'm going to put you on a cart to sell ice cream. Mm-hmm. And here's a situation. A guest walks up and they say, we bought an ice cream 5 minutes ago in Fantasyland. And between there and here, my son dropped his ice cream and we had to throw it away. Can we get another one, please? Now I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do?
Of course.
So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Course.
Well, yeah, because the common purpose is not to make sure people are telling the truth. And the common purpose isn't to make sure we never give anything away for free, or we try to make sure we save all our inventory. The idea is make magic. And at Disney, if a guest tells you they dropped their ice cream, they're going to get another ice cream, no questions asked. And it's a simple thing, but try that in almost every other place in the world. And they'll be like, do you have your receipt? How do I know you really dropped the ice cream? It's that. But that's the differentiator. And they don't have to call a manager. They don't have to call for special permission. They do it. And that's where I think probably the differentiator is how we create that environment. There's a common purpose, and we tell stories around it every day about how people are doing it, and we keep moving the ball forward and getting better at doing that.
As you asked me that question, I was thinking I would give them the free ice cream, but I would love to I would kind of look at the child, if it was a child or whatever, and try to, I don't know, something a little extra magical, talk to them about the ice cream that had fallen, or, hey, Mickey just stopped by and dropped this off for me to give to you. Cause
Absolutely. So here's another story on that. There's something that happens. I'd love to know how often this happens, because it happens all the time. The guests get on the bus, they get to Magic Kingdom, they go through the main entrance, they look at their 2-year-old who's in the stroller, and the kid has one shoe on. And I'm sure it's happened to you. You're like, where's the other shoe? Well, it's between here and the Fort Wilderness campground. Right? We don't know. The shoe's gone because kids kick their shoes off. They don't like to have shoes on. You should have known this, parent. So now you're looking around saying, well, I guess we got to buy another pair of shoes. And you go in the Emporium, the big merchandise location, and you're like, you know what? Maybe we're on a budget. Maybe we didn't plan on buying these shoes. This is now slowing us down. What should happen, and it happens often, either an employee will notice that, or when the people go in the Emporium, they'll say, hey, how you doing? Do you have kids shoes, baby shoes? Our kid kicked a shoe off. We need to buy shoes. I would say 50 out of 50% of the time, half the time, that employee is going to say, you know what? These are on Mickey today. Come pick out a pair of shoes. And they'll go get a pair of shoes. They'll pick it. They'll give them to them. They'll fill out. We have a little coupon because you got to keep, okay, we scan it. We make sure we know those were given away for inventory purposes. And that gets put in the register. And that employee had the opportunity, because once again, only at Disney is your kid going to lose shoes and we're going to give you a new pair of shoes. It's not a policy, and it doesn't happen every time, but it's happened enough that employees know that that's something that's going to happen. And that's the way we are going to recover, and we're going to make that situation right. And that guest experience has gone from here to here, and we found that at Disney. If you have a good experience at Disney and never have a problem, you'll rate us at, 80%. If you have a problem, whether it's our fault or not, and we fix it for you quickly and magically, you're going to rate us way higher than if you never had a problem at all. Because you see how in the moment, we care about what's going on and we take care of you. So that is in the philosophy. A lot of companies, the first thing they'll say is, well, yeah, you do that in my place, and someone's going to have all their family and cousins come in. They're going to give away all the free shoes to everybody. And I'm like, well, if you don't have tracking systems in place, if one person gives away 20 pair of shoes in one day, we're probably going to go retrain them or find out what's going on. So it's not, and we're not going to go out of business. We're not going to go broke. But I think what organizations do, they try to put policies and procedures and rules in for the exceptions, because the reality is there's always going to be a small percentage of employees that have bad intent, might steal, might do things but somehow we put policies in place. And we punish the 99.9% of people who are going to do the honest thing and do the right thing and take care of the customer. And we put a rule in place because we don't want to lose that 0.01%. And when you talk about it with accounting and finance, it makes sense. But when you really look at it from the big picture, it doesn't make any sense at all. Because you know what? I can give a free pair of shoes to every guest that comes to the Magic Kingdom, and I'm still going to make a lot of money because they've already paid for the ticket, the hotel, the food and beverage, the whole deal. So it's just trying to put everyone in a different mindset. And instead of putting policies in place, give them an operating philosophy that says you're empowered to take care of the guest. And if you go too far, we'll coach you, but we're not going to fire you. And we're going to encourage you to take care of the situation. And if we can do that with 74,000 employees at Walt Disney World, the success is going to continue because everyone feels like they can do it. Now, I'm not saying that happens every day. It doesn't happen every day. There's all kinds, we're constantly trying to make that happen, but that's the vision.
Wow. It's funny. I was just going to share a story with you before you started that story. When we were taking our kids, we're Disney Vacation Club members. We take them every couple of years. We went to Epcot. Went and had a really nice dinner, got on the monorail, got to Epcot, got off the monorail. My daughter, who was like 8, had left her favorite purse on the monorail.
Yep.
So I went to security and I asked.
First time it's happened, ever.
Yeah, right. So I went to security and I said, this happened. They contacted the monorail pilot. When he got to the station, he found the purse, gave that to another monorail pilot who went to who came back around to Epcot, dropped it off with security. Security brought it down to me. My daughter's over there near Spaceship Earth, and with the tears in her eyes, she turns around. I swear to God, I give her the purse just as fireworks are going off.
It's a commercial. And
it's like that, Yeah. I just think that Disney always gives me goosebumps. So
I think it's a great story.
That's really.
How do you turn negatives into positives? If you can train your employees and your companies to say, perform at a level and nothing ever goes wrong, and when they do go wrong, have a great plan to fix that situation, and it even gets better than that. And so that's where we thrive on.
And right in there is the key, because it's taking employees from doing just what they need to do to that extra step, something they don't necessarily need to do. Because, who would have known if he hadn't said, let me help you? But that
Sure.
discretionary effort, keeping them so engaged that they will actually
Yep.
do that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to be, again, really respectful of your time here. We talked about your dad, Lee Cockerell, was with Disney, and his roles there were.
He retired in 2006 as the executive vice president of operations. So he reported to the president of Walt Disney World, and he was responsible for all operations.
That's amazing. And I know he's also consulting and.
Yep. He retired at 63, wrote 4 books, does keynote speeches, does podcasts. I mean, he's a powerhouse.
Yeah, because I know on LinkedIn or where I see your stuff coming through, I see his stuff coming through. I think it's really cool. It doesn't fall far from the tree, right? It's just.
Yeah.
And I heard about something. Let's see. I think it was called Life After Disney webinars. That when your dad did, when there was the whole furlough with the pandemic. That was so cool. Can you tell me about that and how that happened?
Yeah, it was Valerie, my dad, and I all participated in that. And the idea was we're not at Disney anymore, but we still know a lot of people. We keep in touch with a lot of people, and we saw the furloughs happening. And it was tough because we know what people are going through, because it was tough enough to leave Disney after 26 years. I can't imagine being told you're leaving tomorrow and we don't know if you're coming back. I mean, it's pretty emotional, and a lot of people worked there for a long time. Yeah. So we thought we were probably uniquely positioned to be able to get on a call and talk to them about life after Disney, because we lived life after Disney. And if I was still an executive at Disney, I couldn't do a call like that, because, Dan, you can't go run a webinar for all these people. And if you say the wrong thing, you're executive of the company and you made a promise, but not being there were no rules. We could do whatever we want. So we put out on Facebook and said, look, we feel for all of you who got furloughed. We know how stressful this is. And we've been out for a couple of years now, and we would love to get on a call. If you'd like to join us on a webinar, it's free. And we'd love to talk to you about what our experience has been like leaving Disney and what we've learned along the way, and just give you some context, because things are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And some of you are going to go back to Disney eventually. And some of you in 5 years from now are going to say the pandemic and the furlough was the best thing that happened to me. I never would have made this life choice if that hadn't forced me to. And you're going to go into something and be wildly successful. So I'm not saying we should celebrate, the pandemic or anything, but it's sometimes you make choices, and sometimes things happen in life that, wars happen, pandemics happen, things happen that change everyone's path. And people can sit, and some people on this call said, they were neither. They're like, well, Dan, how long do you think before Disney starts hiring again? And my dad spoke up and he said, you know what, maybe never. So you need to face reality that they may not, you may never be able to go back there and get hired again. So what are you going to do? And just kind of shaking people out of and saying, you got to take control of what's going on right now. And you got to start getting on and looking around. And I'll tell you, a lot of cast members started these side gigs. They were building gift baskets. Mm-hmm. One guy who's a chef, he started working in selling in sales for a roofing company. And he was incredibly great at it, because he wouldn't try to sell you a roof. He'd go in and talk to you about how to get your insurance involved and maybe find how you can fix it without paying money. And so he knew how to sell because he'd worked at Disney. He's like, I'm not here to sell, I'm here to help. And when the furlough was off and they told him to come back, he said, well, I was waiting for you all to call. I'm going to resign because I'm making 3 times more money and I'm 10 times happier selling roofs than being a chef. And he'd been a chef his whole life. So the idea was, once again, I think giving everyone some empathy, letting them know, and I think taking advantage of our name and the reputation we had to reach back out and kind of give back to a lot of cast members who'd really been suffering and were worried about that. It was extremely fulfilling to be able to do that, because when you're in a consulting thing, you do things for people, but I don't often have a chance to go do stuff like that. So it was pretty neat.
And what's it like to do that with your dad? That's got to be pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. I'll tell you, early on in my career, I was like what most people say, well, it's nepotism. You're there because he's there. And, and for a long time, I really had this chip on my shoulder to prove myself. And then finally I talked to a guy one day, he goes, Dan, he goes, are you telling me your dad never helped you in your career? I'm like, well, of course he did. He raised me. He got me to be curious, exposure, experience. He helped open doors. He goes, why don't you tell people that? Because of course he did. You ever get advice from him? I say all the time. Well, that's the truth. So when I start telling people, like, are you in the job because your dad? I say, absolutely. He gave me direction. He's helped me out. He's, once you get in the job, you have to do the job. But it kind of took it from there, and people go, oh, okay, you admitted it. So I guess there's no more drama. But what we learned was we were, Valerie and my dad and I, and all three of our kids have worked at Disney a couple times. We told them, look, you don't have to work at Disney, but if you do, you really need to do a good job, and you need to treat, and, we want them to be their own people, but we say we all have a reputation here, and what any of us does reflects on everyone else. And I took that seriously. My dad did, Valerie did. And over time, I think we were really able to, prop each other up and help each other in that regard. So,
how are we doing on time? We okay on time right now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. You also did some work with the Disney Institute too, right? Can you?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, Valerie was a facilitator there for 7 years. She did a lot of work in Quebec, French-speaking Canada, because of her language skills. I never facilitated there, but I was a guest speaker. I started doing that in, I want to say 1999, I think. I started as a guest speaker at Disney Institute. When they do their programs, they usually bring a manager or an executive in to speak to the groups that are there externally. And when they were looking for speakers, I raised my hand and I said, I'd love to get better at speaking. And I did that from 99 until 2018. So almost 20 years, I was a speaker at Disney Institute. And in the back of my head somewhere, I never thought I'd ever leave Disney. I thought I'd retire there like everyone does. But in the back of my head, I told myself, you know what, this may be helpful someday. This may pay off if you really get to practice. So I got to train and rehearse and practice public speaking for 20 years before I had to go do it for a living. And so that was a great investment. And so I never said no. Whenever they called, hey, we need you tomorrow for speaking, the other speaker called in sick, I'll be there. And it was great because I got to test out material. I got to meet people from outside companies, see how it landed. And it was good practice. I think, if you're going to be in, a lot of roles today, you need to be good at public speaking, and you don't have to be in a group of 1,000 people, but you need to, have a presence. So that was a little side training I did during my career.
And how do you see Disney Institute? Because I mean, that feels like a natural fit with everything you've been talking about today. How do you see that as an extension of Disney and Disney World? Like, how does that fit in with the overall experience, would you say?
Yeah, well, what happened was there's a Disney University, and Disney University is focused on training internally. Every new employee that arrives does orientation, all the training that internally goes through Disney University. Well, many decades ago, Disney University started to get the calls saying, hey, do you train outside companies? Because you're a Disney University, we assume we can hire you. And they said, no, it's only internal. And that's when someone said, well, maybe we should have external training and have people come in here and learn the Disney way, how to lead, how to give great customer service. And while we're doing that, we can sell them hotel rooms and we can sell them park tickets, and they can bring their families with them. And so that became a business in itself of, hey, we're going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes and teach you a little bit about this. And maybe you can take some of these tips and tricks and strategies back to your company to put in place to become better at what you do.
It sure seems like, and then in your new role, that sure seems like just a natural extension of everything you did at Disney, and just kind of like a natural evolutionary next step to that. That moment when you decided you needed to leave Disney to go do that, bring us into that moment. What was that like?
To go start our own company?
Yeah, and leave Disney. Those two things.
Yeah. It was, well, first of all, it took a year to make that decision. So Valerie and I talked about it for a year. We didn't talk to anyone else about it. It was just back and forth. What do you think? And when we first started talking about it, she brought it up. I said, it's impossible. it's impossible. There's no way. I don't know how to do anything else. And we talked and we talked and we talked. And after a year of conversation, the timing seemed right. Our kids, two were out working. One was going off to college. My parents are in great health. So it seemed like everything was lining up. If we wanted to take a risk, this was the time to do it. And I looked at other companies. I looked at doing things at Disney. One of the things I think that was a big motivator for me about Disney is it's an incredible place to work, but you work a lot. And Valerie and I spent one New Year's Eve together in 26 years. Wow. And Christmas morning, either the kids got up at 5 or 6 in the morning, we opened presents, and I left and got home that night about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Or I'd go to work and we'd open presents that night because I had to be at the park for Christmas and Easter. And so it was pretty demanding. And I think Valerie and I decided we can stay here or we can go try something new and maybe have some more freedom to go visit the world, curiosity, exposure, experience. And so I just call this my 20th job. It's not necessarily a different, now it was a big change. And it was a little bit surreal. And I'll tell you, the last couple days before, like my second to last day, I was down near the cafeteria, and we did a little cast celebration, and I was hanging out to say goodbye. Cause over 26 years, I met a lot of people. And so I was there to say goodbye to everybody. And I was supposed to go out and maybe spend an hour, and 5 hours later, I was still out there saying goodbye to people and hugging people and talking to people. And Valerie and I she had some friends in town. We went to dinner that night, and we went to dinner and we had a drink, and they were going to go see the fireworks. I said, I got to go home. I said, I'm emotionally wrecked. I didn't see that coming, but I was just drained about, emotionally, physically, mentally. But one quick funny story. Well, two quick stories. While people were in that line to say goodbye to me, at one point I looked up and Cinderella was in line, and I'm like, all right, I've made it. I don't care what else I do in my life. Cinderella is in line waiting to say goodbye to me. And so that for me was like, I made it. The other funny thing is one lady came up who I never knew, and she shook my hand. She said, Dan, it's very nice to meet you. I said, well, thank you. I forget what her name was. And she said, I just want to tell you, this is a great place. You're going to love it here. Welcome. And she walked away. So she didn't know who I was or what I was doing, but she got in line. And when she got there, she just figured I just gotten there, and she welcomed me. So I'm like, people don't always know what's going on, but I was pretty, I saw a lot of people as I was leaving, but yeah, it was emotional. And after you're used to that structured environment for so long, and all of a sudden you're at home and you're like, all right, what do we do today? It's and how do I become an entrepreneur? Where do we start? That was scary and exhilarating and fun and stressful. And for 3.5 years, we've been figuring it out. And it's been like, we tell people, it's like we just got out of college, except this time we're a lot smarter and we got a little money in our pocket. But besides that, it's the same. It's like all brand new.
That's awesome. And then you also do work or support junior achievement too.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how does that fit in the puzzle here?
Yeah, well, I was on. If people aren't familiar with junior achievement, I did junior achievement in high school back in the '80s, and junior achievement it was a club. You'd come together with other students after school, and you'd create your own company. You'd pick a product, you'd pick a price, you'd sell it, you'd market it, you'd do all the financials, and at the end of the semester, you'd liquidate the company and now, I think in today you donate the money to a nonprofit. Back in the 80s, we'd divide the money out and keep it. So it was a little bit different. We weren't quite as thoughtful about the community as kids are today. But you really learned about the free enterprise system. That's what JA was created to do. So when I moved to Florida, when I became a GM, I said, I really should do some nonprofit work and that give back kind of thing. And junior achievement was available for a board position for Disney. So I became a board member, and I served on the board for probably 16 years and helped. So junior achievement's incredible. They teach kids, they teach kindergartners about how a community operates. They teach high schoolers about how to interview for a job, how to make a budget, how to learning about credit cards and interest rates and just all the stuff that kind of financial literacy. And I was involved with that for many years. And Disney did a bowl-a-thon every year that was a huge contributor to junior achievement because they're a nonprofit and would contribute to them. So that continues to be something I'm real passionate about. I've done some pro bono speeches and work with JA. The junior achievement headquarters are here in Colorado Springs. So hopefully I'm going to make it down there over the next few months and see them and see where I can get involved. But it's there's so many organizations out there to help. I just tell people, pick one and do something. Go do something. If you've been lucky enough to have a successful career and gotten a lot, it's time for you to go help people.
That's awesome. So just a few last questions here to wrap up. One of which you just kind of touched on, which is you're in Colorado Springs now, right?
We're just south of Boulder, near Denver. Yeah.
So you moved from Orlando or Florida, lived in a lot of different places, right? And it reminds me of whenever we would get to the beach club at Walt Disney World, the first thing they say to you is "Welcome home."
Welcome home. Yeah.
So with all the moving around, where is home for you?
Gosh, I think what I've kind of come to the conclusion to is home is where I'm with my family. I think, home is my wife and I. If we're here now, this is our home. When for the first time in 2.5 years, we're going to have my parents, all three of our kids, all together for Christmas. That'll be home. Whether it's a rented Airbnb or wherever we're going to be, where the family is home. I look back at my childhood homes. And I visited some of them, but there's probably 8 or 9, 10 different houses I lived in growing up, and I have great memories from all of them. So home for me is, where I am with the people I love.
That's awesome. Quick questions. Favorite Disney attraction?
Yeah. So, it's always hard to answer that. I think what Valerie and we've concluded, Rock and Roller Coaster at Disney's Hollywood Studios. We're kids of the 80s. We grew up with that music, and it's a great ride. It's smooth, it's fast, it's cool. So anyway, that's always been something that we enjoy doing. And Valerie she went to the Hollywood Studios for her birthday one time with a bunch of friends, and they ended up running into Steven Tyler, who was visiting the ride and riding it. From Aerosmith. So she's like, it must be karma. That's why it's my favorite, because I've run into Steven Tyler at the attraction.
Well, you talk about coincidences. I interviewed in this series Jim Scholl, who was a former Imagineer who worked on Rock and Roller Coaster. And he talked about when the band came to ride the coaster. And he said they loved it so much that they sent one of their technicians to work with him and get them every prop they actually needed for, when you walk in and you see the studio.
Sure.
So cool. Okay, so favorite Disney food?
Favorite Disney food? It's funny. I had to answer this a couple of weeks ago, and it's easy to go a lot of ways, but there is, if you're at the Magic Kingdom, everyone knows about Aloha Isle, and you can get the pineapple whip. And we did, I don't know if they still do it, but at one point we were putting a hot ring of pineapple with some cake and then putting the ice cream on top of that and heating it up. And that was just really good. Probably 1 billion calories, but boy, it was good.
Calories don't exist at Disney World.
That's just what we tell people.
Right, exactly. So last question, and it's the quote that is so often attributed to Walt Disney, which is, I hope people remember one thing. It all started with a mouse, right? So if we were talking about your career, and what would we say? It all started with
I would say probably a passion for adventure, right? And when I say adventure doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't mean it's always good, but it means you're going to go out and you don't know what's coming next. And it seems like that's been a big part of what I've done over my career and really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you. Really appreciate it. If people are interested in contacting you, to talk about possible speaking, consulting, et cetera, where would you like them most to be able to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways. You can Google me, Dan Cockerell. You can go to dancockerell.com. That was my first website. Then my wife built our second website, cockerellconsulting.com, and it's really nice. Or you can just get me on LinkedIn. And, I answer my own phone. We're all pretty accessible, and would love to talk to you.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate your doing this today.
Well, thanks for the time, Jim.
And thanks to you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Coincidental Conversations. Thanks. Bye.